when listening to one of those Texans podcasts, one of them was like, you can put Quentin Nelson at one of these guard spots and it's not fixing anything along the offensive line. I'm like, damn, it's that bad right now?
They win the NFC South.
What's good, everybody? Let's talk some Tampa sports. Bucs looking to go 2-0 on the year, moving on from the Atlanta Falcons, moving to the Houston Texans, and that's exactly what we're doing here today, is breaking down the Houston Texans ahead of this Monday night prime time, rocking the red and pewter at Energy Stadium. Let's get into this. It's an interesting team, the Houston Texans are. Let's talk a little bit how they looked and felt coming into the season first, because it's still just week 2, and then we'll get into the game last week. Last season was very inconsistent. I think we can safely call it that. Inconsistent for the Houston Texans. So let's take a look at their schedule from last year. I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just I feel like that inconsistency is going to carry over this year. That's why I'm speaking on this. Like, just weird losses. Getting throttled by the Vikings. Then they beat Buffalo. Lose to the Jets, only scoring 13 points. Lose to the Titans, who end up with the first round pick. Their offense gets shut out at home against Baltimore on Christmas. I remember that game vividly and just being pissed off that that's the game I got stuck with on Christmas night. Inconsistent. And a lot of that has to do with their offensive line. Damn near all of it, if I say so myself. Their offensive line is bad. It is bad. I don't typically, when I do these videos, drag on players, position groups, just other teams in general, unless they're in the NFC South. They're an AFC team. I have no issue with the Texans, but I'm just being honest. And even listening to their podcast this week, listening to Houston Texan podcast, their offensive line is bad. They admit to it. I'm sure any Texans fans that come and watch this video, you'll admit to it. The offensive line is bad. It's a bunch of draft picks that are not panning out. I mean, the last 2 years they've drafted guards in the second round. They're not even getting playing time. Their center just went down with injury. We'll have to wait on the injury report until tomorrow since the game's on Monday night. They got a journeyman left tackle after they trade Laramie Tunsil, who was definitely, yes, a ton of penalties last year from Tunsil, but they end up trading him. And then they bring in a journeyman in Cam Robinson from the Minnesota Vikings, and it's just like, what are they doing trying to like bargain buy along the offensive line? That does not work in the NFL. I just don't know what they're doing there. Cam Robinson, he played in the last 2 games for the Minnesota Vikings last year and gave up 21 pressures in 2 games. If you're not someone who like pays attention to pressures, Tunsil didn't have 21 pressures the entire season last year for the Houston Texans. His replacement gave up 21 in 2 games. So why are we bargain buying along the offensive line when the offensive line was already bad in 2024? I don't know. I don't understand. It doesn't seem like a way to set up your quarterback, who I think can just be an absolute star in this league. 2023, he was... No one forgot this. 2023, he was doing things that we have not seen in a very long time, if ever, from a rookie quarterback. And last year, it was just kind of unimpressive, and I think a lot of it has to do with what he was working with. The situation. They end up firing Bobby Slowick and bringing in Nick Haley because of what happened with the offense last season, and I'm not going to pretend to know if Slowick was actually the issue, or was it the personnel that he was working with. There's injuries out wide. They don't really do much there either. Stephon Diggs goes elsewhere. Tank Dell's still just dealing with what Tank Dell is always dealing with, unfortunately. They do draft wide receivers, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel. Higgins, I think, can be pretty good very soon. Noel seems to be like a little bit more of a project. Outside of him, Justin Watson, Xavier Hutchinson. It's just not a ton in terms of your top 2 guys, Stroud and Collins. Because when you think of the Texans, the 2 players, at least for me, maybe just because of fantasy that come to mind, is Stroud and Collins. So you're just like, oh, they got a pretty decent offense. It's the defense that absolutely carries this team and is always looking at the offense like, come on, guys, pick up your slack. Let's go. The defense is nice. And we'll get into that. But let's just talk about this offense and what they have going on. Like I said, offensive line issues all over the place. There's no way around it. I'm not going to continue to drag on it. You'll hear about it in the preview tomorrow again, talking about how the Bucs can take advantage of this. Nico Collins, absolute stud. I'm surprised they didn't try to get him the ball more last week against the Los Angeles Rams. I think he only had 4 targets, which, if I'm a Texans fan, I'm losing my mind over that. Stroud, I think he had an okay game. I did rewatch the entire game against the Rams. I thought he had an okay game. It wasn't anything special. But once again, I don't think there's a ton of help for him. I do think it's interesting. I'm not going to say whether it's a good or bad thing because I don't know. But it is interesting that Nick Haley, by the way, if that name sounds familiar, the Bucs did interview him for their offensive coordinator opening during this offseason. Obviously, the Bucs end up going with their in-house guy anyways, but the Texans were the team that ended up getting him. So if that name sounds familiar. Sloak was very strict as an offensive coordinator. He really did not give Stroud very much room to, make audibles, make his own decisions. It seems like Nick Haley is going to allow Stroud to do that sort of thing. So we'll see how that goes. Week 1, Stroud even admitted himself there was some misreads, some things that he needed to catch and pick up on. So it's going to be a little bit of a progress. He's still a young quarterback. He's in game 1 of year 3. But I do have hope for Stroud. And I just hope, once again, I have no hate for the Texans. I do hope for Stroud and hope for Texans fans that they figure out the offensive line, that they hit on these 2 wide receivers that they took on day 2 in the draft this year. And I haven't talked about running back. I think they need to figure out the running back room too. Nick Chubb, it's a solid veteran. Joe Mixon, once again, solid veteran, but I attempted to look at when is Joe Mixon returning to the football field. I don't know if I'm just not looking in the right place, but I could find nothing. I could really find nothing on that. It seems like no one knows when he's coming back. Dameon Pierce has fallen off a cliff. What he did in his rookie year 3-ish years ago, I think, just not the same sense. Dare Ogunbowale, former Buck, we know what he brings to the table. He's really a special teamer. If I'm going to label him as anything, as long as he's, as a Bucs fan going into this game, as long as he's playing running back and not kicking field goals and doing a bunch of wild, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm good. Please play him at running back. I'm surprised they're not giving Woody Marks more touches. He is a guy that they did trade for. And I think he can bring some, explosiveness and talent to a running back room that severely needs it. When you talk about Nick Chubb is up there in age, Dameon Pierce, once again, what is he still doing? And then Dare Ogunbowale, that's a special teamer. I'm sorry. I know he's a captain. I know he's a fan favorite. And I know he screwed the Bucs last time we played in 2023. I'll talk more about that game tomorrow. Play him at running back, please. Dalton Schultz, that's a solid tight end there. But yeah, it's not the most impressive offense, despite their top 2 guys, Stroud and Collins, being, in my opinion, very, very talented, and both Collins as well. Like, he has the build, he has the speed, he has everything. You just look at him, he's like, that is a receiver right there, if you've ever seen one. But outside of that, it's just a little bit unimpressive in my eyes. I'm not going to say it's bad. I think they can end up being an average offense. I'm not going to say it's bad because there's so much potential with all of the young guys that they can take a step. And then if this offensive line, if they cut out all this weird shuffling and moving guys to different positions, and if they can find some consistency here, I think this can be a pretty average, maybe even they sneak into above average, but that's an if. That's an if these young guys progress, Higgins, Noel, etc. And then that's if they can protect CJ Stroud. And that's if they can be disciplined and not get a bunch of holding penalties. I think the first play of the game against the Rams, if I remember correctly watching it, was a holding penalty. And it's just like, oh boy. After I sat here and listened to these Texans podcasts complaining about how bad the offensive line is, they come into 2025 and the first play is a holding penalty. Oh. When listening to one of those Texans podcasts, one of them was like, you can put Quentin Nelson at one of these guard spots and it's not fixing anything along the offensive line. I'm like, damn, it's that bad right now? Let's go ahead and switch over to the defense side of the ball, though, and I'll put this back on the screen just because I think it's a good visual. Whether you believe in Pro Football Focus grades or not, I enjoy this visual, so I want to leave this up there. That's why I'm not speaking on like, oh, Nico Collins had a 58.7. He played bad against the Rams. Like, that's why I'm not talking about any of that. I just like it as a visual, so I'm just leaving it on the screen. So, despite some of the grades here, like a grade of 40 from Derek Stingley Jr., don't let any of this misconstrue the fact that this is a very good, talented, tough, and heavy on the tough defense. It all starts with those two edge rushers, Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. Both I'd put in the upper echelon of edge rushers. They have two of them. How we're struggling to find one. How the hell did they get two? The inside isn't too bad either. That's a good veteran in Sheldon Rankins. Tim Settle's not too bad either. Out on the edges, you have Derek Stingley Jr., All-Pro. Nothing else to say there. It's going to be very exciting to watch him and Mike Evans go at it. I will say I do think Devontae Adams just a wee bit got the best of him in LA at SoFi, so we'll see how Mike Evans does follow that up. I know he did exit the game with injury. Once again, we still need to wait till tomorrow to get that first injury report, but he did exit the game and end up coming back into it. So just wanted to make that note there. Think about that draft class. I don't know if it was 2022. Yes, 2022. Think about that draft class. Stingley was the guy that was kind of the forgotten guy when it comes to those two early corners, Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley Jr. Sauce was all the rave in year one. And then Stingley, in my opinion, started overtaking Sauce when you talk about the top cornerback from that class. And it's interesting because, we're playing the Texans this week. I get to talk about Derek Stingley Jr. Next week we play the Jets. I get to talk about Sauce Gardner. So kind of funny how that works. Cam Lassiter, very solid cornerback there. Drafted last year, I believe. Yep, 2024. Physical, strong. Does a pretty good job in the run game as well. So those are two very good corners out wide. There is one player that is not being shown here. Let's switch over to nickel so we can get this guy on the field. And that's Mr. Jalen Petrie. If I learned anything from digging into this team, listening to these podcasts, watching these videos on the Houston Texans, outside of them telling me how bad their offensive line is, it is how much they cannot stand number 5. Like, they hate this dude. He has not been good in coverage. He is their nickel corner. And as a Bucs fan, obviously I'm excited. You look at what Puka Nacua did last week against this guy. I think he had 10 catches for 130 yards. And he basically outdid the entire wide receiver core of the Houston Texans. I think the Texans' entire wide receiver core was like 11 for 121. And Puka himself, who is primarily a slot guy, 10 for 130. Emeka Egbuka, if you have him in fantasy, he scored 2 touchdowns last week, so you're probably already going to start him this week anyways. Start him in fantasy. Jalen Petrie is not a good cover nickel corner. Start Emeka Egbuka. There's been a lot of talk about Mike Evans playing more in the slot as well. This especially if they want to get Mike Evans away from Derek Stingley Jr. Number 5, based on what I've been told, is, I'm trying to think of who's a Bucs player, like a Chris Conti. Like, we are just so sick of just seeing him on the field. That's the level I got from listening to the Houston fan base. Just ready to get him completely out of here. Going to the linebackers, Alshire and Toto, like, these guys scare me. Like, I would not want to be on offense running a slant, running a drag, running anything that cuts inside against these two dudes, because they'll take your head off. I'll leave it at that. I mean, they're both, I think Alshire is pretty decent in coverage. Toto is solid, but they're just two very good linebackers. I wouldn't say very good. Two very solid linebackers that back up a very talented defensive line. And it fits perfectly in this DeMeco Ryans defense. Looking at the back end, they bring in one of my most hated players, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Of course, spent time with the Saints, spent time with the Eagles, my two least favorite teams. Cannot stand this guy. He's a yapper. And it's, yeah, I hope we have a good game against him. I don't think he had the greatest game of his career last week either. So hopefully that carries over. I did see him send out a tweet saying, we'll bounce back, pack out NRG Stadium, let's go. So he's already talking. Moving over to Kalen Bullock, I think he's okay. It's not anything that I'm worried about here. He was drafted last year in the 3rd round. Still someone who they're looking to continue to grow on that back end. So that's the Houston Texans. I think that covers just about all of it. Your two primary weaknesses seem to be nickel corner and the entire offensive line. Strengths, obviously, CJ Stroud. If he has protection, if he finds any bit of momentum, confidence, we know what he can do. Once again, I'll talk about 2023 tomorrow. Nico Collins, I think he's about as talented as any receiver in the NFL. As talented. I'm not going to call him a top 5 receiver yet, but as talented for sure. Defense terrifies me. I'll leave it at that. So we'll talk about how the Bucs match up with them tomorrow during our preview. But today just wanted to dig into the Houston Texans so I can do the job of that for you guys, and you guys can just watch this maybe 17-minute video, 15-minute video after I edit it, instead of what I had to do listening to hours of Texans podcasts and rewatching their entire game. So thank you for watching, and I hope you appreciate the efforts here. So leave your comments down below. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Go Bucs. I'll talk to you tomorrow. You all have a blessed one.